Welcome to A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm your host, Eric P. Bishop. This is a place where interesting people come to talk about their creative outlets. As for myself, I'm an author, podcast host, travel enthusiast, and lover of the outdoors. If you'd like to learn more about my published works or adventures, go to my website, ericpbishop.com. I hope you enjoy the show, and please go out and support today's guest. Thanks, and enjoy the journey. Welcome to the latest episode of A Tale of Two Scribes, and tonight I am pleased to have Brett Allen on the program. Hey Brett, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing well. So I think I found you, and we probably connected through the glorious thing called social media. So
Yeah, it's amazing the number of author connections I've made simply via Twitter
yeah, you
or
know,
X. I don't want to
X.
offend anyone, but
If you call it either one, you probably are safe.
yeah,
Just throw them both out there. Yeah, the community is something. It's a pretty special thing, and I don't know about how your day job, regular life stuff is, but most of the people that are in my network are not writers. A few people that have dabbled in it, but no one that's actually finished a novel or published a novel in my close circle. So the benefit of social media on my end is I've actually been able to reach out and connect to people that at least that portion of life we kind of talk the same language.
yeah, definitely. I found the same thing. I would say that pretty much I would say 95% of the opportunities that I've come across in the writer world have originated from Twitter.
Yeah.
Uh, just posts that I've seen that I responded to.
Hmm.
Uh, had mentioned before we started recording that I used to write some gear reviews for Task and Purpose, and that's how I found that job, was they had put a tweet out looking for people who were interested. So
Yeah.
it's definitely made some connections for me that I never would have had before.
Exactly. Yeah. The power of social media, and Uh, it was an interesting thing because when I wrote my first novel and my first agent that kind of slapped my hand a little bit and said, "Well, where's your social media presence?" And I've said this a lot on the podcast. I literally, I don't know if I responded, but at least my thought process was, social media is for suckers. Why would you? I think I had already gotten rid. I had a Facebook account years before that, and I was on it. And yeah, you'd connect with people you knew at high school or maybe even elementary school that you hadn't seen for 30 years, but and family and friends, of course. But I just was kind of like, yeah, I don't need to do this. So I dropped the account. So I had nothing at the time. And then it was basically told, hey, go get 10,000 Twitter followers, get a website, basically a list. This person gave me back a list of things. Once you get this, then reach back out. And I believe I did like a year later and they still rejected me. So
It's not easy to get that many Twitter followers. That's crazy.
well, and I did it back in 2016, 2017, and I didn't cheat in the sense of buying or doing anything like that, but what I just started reading like how do you grow a network. So there was apps out there that you could basically they tied into Twitter somehow, and I don't even remember now. It's been so many years. Where you'd go out and follow, like I'd look for people that were tied to the writing community and stuff or interested in writing, and you'd go follow like 100 people. And then maybe 30 of those people would follow you, and then you could see a few days later who followed, who didn't, and you could basically unfollow the other ones,
Gotcha.
refollow another group. So the number's impressive. The way I did it now that I know how the interactions work and all that, I don't, A, I wouldn't suggest people to do it, and B, the negative on that is, yeah, you might have 10, I think I'm up to 12,000 now, and probably those 2,000 are a lot more um, authentic, homegrown in the last couple of years that they've added on. But having that number and you post something and you get like 5 likes or 20
Right.
likes or 10 likes. But the crazy thing is you look at like people that have 1 million followers, and it's not like every time they post something they get, 50,000 likes. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
And it's a double-edged sword too, right? I probably could have written two or three more books in the amount of time I've wasted on Twitter. So
I'm sure Twitter has it. I know my son just, we were talking, offline, and my son just turned 18, and he actually, on his 18th birthday, because he's not a social media fan, although he'd constantly grab my phone in the last year and say, hey, Dad, let me see your phone. And he was doing it for bluegrass. He'd want to go see what his bluegrass, mentors or people he was interested in, what were they saying online. So he'd grab my phone and jump on that or jump on YouTube. I guess he had YouTube on his phone, but he didn't have any social media accounts. So he'd always pilfer mine for it. 18th birthday, he literally went out and he texted me and said, I'm starting an Instagram account. I'm gonna follow. You're gonna be my first follow." And I was just like, I was honored. I was like, okay. And I immediately saw the message pop up. I followed him back and I even screenshot it and said, "Hey," for when he's a big deal one time and he's like, one day and he's like, "Who are you?" I'll be like, "Hey man, I was your first follower."
Right? And I'll start pitching my books.
Exactly. Exactly. Actually, it's funny. So just turned 18. And he was actually in Nashville for a bluegrass conference. So I went up, surprised him, which was really fabulous. But we didn't really took him and like six or seven of the guys out for dinner that night. So that was kind of my chance to do something with him on his birthday. And then he went back to Music World the rest of the weekend. So when I had him this weekend, I said, okay, we're gonna do not a party, just some family, but we're gonna actually I decorate the house and I got stuff. And I pulled out old DVDs of him like first, second, third birthdays. And so we're playing some, and we've talked a lot about music over the years, and his tastes have really gotten expanding of what he's interested in. But one of the things that was playing on the tape is he's like 2 years old, playing in the living room, and we're sitting here watching it, and music was going on in the background, and it was U2 playing. And I said, "Bruce, who's singing?" And he just looked over at the camera and he goes, "Bono." And so he laughed when he saw it because he was just like,
Awesome.
yeah, that's probably when the music stuff, the interest started. I was like, yeah, dude, I pumped that stuff in you since you were like a couple of months old, man.
Nice.
Yeah. No, it's fun. Like we were talking offline. And you know, anyone listening that's got kids that have gotten older, man, that goes so quick. So quick. But it's also a blessing to have them get to that point where they're independent. He's been already accepted at college, trying to figure out the financing and all that now, which is super, super fun. But yeah, you just kind of see them starting on their own path. The hardest start part as the parent, for me at least, is not letting go, but knowing that your time with them is so limited. I think the stat I read a while back was like by the time your kid turns 18, you've spent something like 93% of the time you will spend with them in in your or their life or whatever. So
Yeah.
you just gives you that reality of, hey, that time that you have going forward, try to value it and make it not special like you do everything together, like do big things together, but make it intentional. Make that time intentional. So but I
Yep.
get it too because I had parents growing up, still do. My parents, unfortunately, both my parents are alive. And you know, when I was 18, I didn't want to be like, "Hey, mom, dad, you guys want to go see a movie? You want to go to a concert?" It's like, no.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still in the phase. I got mine are 9 and 11, so like
Mhm.
we still do a lot of like stuff together, family stuff,
Yeah.
and I've tried to make it a rule of like not uh especially on the weekends, not writing during the day and taking away time from spending with them.
Hmm.
Uh, and that slows my process down a little bit, but fortunately, I have a job that allows me to do some writing on the side there.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, but it's more important, you know, and I struggled with that too because I started about 2014, or not about at 2014, I started with my first novel, and that was the one thing I kind of vowed in early in the process for myself is I don't want to take away my family time. I was married at the time. The kids were obviously you're talking 10 years ago, so the kids were much younger. It was 8 and 3, I guess, my daughter. So to carve out that time to write, because it became very important to me, was I just started at 10 o'clock at night. So once everybody went to sleep and the house was quiet, my wife at the time, when I was married, went to sleep pretty early and got up early. And in the morning, she wanted her time to like do stuff, get stuff ready for school and all that. So I would just stay up later and sleep in a little bit, not late, because I had a 9 to 5 job as well, but try to sleep in the morning and just get my writing done. But it took a while to get a process down because when I first started it, I had all these thoughts and dreams pumping through my head. And so I would just write. I'd start at 10 and I'd sometimes go till 3, 4 in the morning. I'd go until I felt like I finished a chapter or I got to a good spot. And so when I finished that first novel, um, I was physically sick, like literally physically sick, because I went 3 months with like very little sleep some nights. So fast forward months later, 6 months later, when I actually started the second novel in the series, um, I structured it. I was like, hey, you get from 10 to 12, and you can go from 12 to 12:30 and watch something to kind of turn your brain off. And I'd watch Seinfeld typically. But you don't get to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning anymore because it's physically not good for you. So the positive on it too, though, is it made me very focused, hyper focused, because I've got 2 hours and not even disciplined enough there where I would stop writing at the end of a paragraph. Maybe I wouldn't stop on a line, but I would get to a paragraph and be like, okay, that's it. You know where you're going. Maybe jot a little note of where I want to go the next night, but you're done. Go to sleep. You need to get to bed. So,
Yeah. That's the best place to end too, though, when you where you know you're where to pick up the next time.
yeah,
So, because it can be hard to end on a chapter end or something like that and not know the direction you're taking the next one or something like that.
absolutely. So let's talk about when did you get that bug to write a book? When did that kick in for you?
So I started writing just for fun in college. Um, I had a friend that I worked with in college who had started a blog, and this was back in like 2000. Oh, it was probably 2004. So this was back when like blogs were a new thing and nobody was reading them whatsoever. So, um, and his blog was called Lies About Ben. And every day he would post a new lie about his brother Ben. And
Did
then he
did
would,
Ben exist?
yes, Ben did
Oh, Ben
exist.
did? Okay.
And Ben knew about it and he was cool with it. But he farmed out the other content to his friends, and most of the other people wrote like sports stuff, college sports stuff.
Yeah.
But I just like started writing these quirky little pieces for Lies About Ben, and I got good feedback from my
Hmm.
family and friends on it. And I was like, hey, this I really enjoy doing this.
Hmm.
Um, I was in ROTC at the time, and then that led into 4 years in the Army. So I kind of put that on the back burner.
Hmm.
But during our deployment to Afghanistan in 2009, there was a lot of stuff going on that was just ridiculous. And I actually told a couple of people I worked with over there that no one would ever believe any of this is true
That
if
this is
I wrote
true,
this
right?
in a novel and just said it was fiction.
Right.
So that kind of put the bug in my brain to start writing stuff down. And
Hmm.
probably about a year after I got out of the Army, I actually started to draft the novel or outline the novel.
Okay.
Um, and that was probably 2011, 2012.
Hmm.
And then I proceeded to write it the wrong way about four different times before I finally got it the way I wanted it.
Sound like a writer.
Yeah, you know, so it's definitely been a long learning process, but yeah, it started all the way back in college, I think, and it just kind of slowly evolved.
Now, did you primarily dive into like short? I know you've written some short stories. Was that something you did early on, or is that something that kind of as you grew as a writer, just kind of you circled back to, or?
Yeah, I actually, the short stories I've done have really, I've seen them as just kind of practice.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I'll get like an idea that's just like a hair of an idea that I don't
Hmm.
feel like's a full story, but I really want to get it out.
Yep.
So I use it to practice my structure. And then if it morphs into something else, or if I can take pieces of it and use it somewhere else, that's great. Some of them I've actually just liked how they were from start to finish, so I'll put them up on my blog
Hmm.
or my website. If anybody reads them, I don't know, but I like that they're out there. Um, the
And some
stuff I
are on
did,
Amazon too, right?
there's a couple on
There's a,
Amazon.
okay.
Yeah, a few of the first ones I did, I put up on Amazon because I was just trying to play with the Amazon publishing and
Hmm.
figure out how all that worked. Um, I've got a friend a buddy from college and the army, that he does my covers for me.
Okay.
And he does an awesome job and
Hmm.
doesn't charge me a dime for him. So I send him a bottle of whiskey every time he makes me a cover.
That's a good investment right there.
So yeah,
Win-win.
gotten a lot of compliments on the latest cover for sure. So
I like
and
it. Yeah, it's
he's
really
doing
good.
a great job. But
Yeah, and that's the interesting part that people, when they don't know anything about the business side and they get into it, it scares people, and in some ways, it maybe motivates people to work hard or to make their book be successful. It's just the costs. So something like that, if you can find a way, when decided years ago, several years back, to just start my own entity, I immediately, it's like, okay, what am I going to do for covers? Because I created some on my own, but they were literally just templates to give me an idea of what I would want to hire someone to do, basically. And so when I finally got to that stage where it's like, okay, I need to have professional covers done, I started just reaching out to other authors. Hey, other authors that were indie authors, of course, because you're with a, agented and Simon and Schuster, they've got someone in house that's designing all their covers. And so I started just getting feedback from people of, hey, this is one. And James Razone, actually, who done Monroe Doctrine, done very successful author. He had actually messaged me back and he said, well, this is my guy that does more like the thrillers type, and he's really good. And he's actually out of Serbia. So literally this morning I sent him the cover for my summer release and I kind of gave him some images, what I'm thinking, uh, fairly detailed. For the last one that came out, Babylon Will Rise, I didn't give him a lot. I gave him very general synopsis of what the story was about, and I just said, give me some, because he'll always work up 3 to 5 covers for me. And with the Babylon Will Rise, there was elements in a bunch of the covers I liked. And the great thing is he'll work with me. So I'm like, I like the troops in this one. I like the flames in this one, the font in this one. And I screenshot. So I took all these screenshots and I just took these images and I just dumped them onto each other, which looked like a fourth grader basically, or 4-year old, drew it with credit. It's horrible, but he got me what I wanted. So,
That's cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
very, very pleased.
it's nice to have some control on that, because like as an author, you put all this time into writing the story, and then like I mean, they say you can't judge a book by its cover, but people do,
You
and
do.
and you want that physical manifestation of all your work to
Yeah,
look the way you want it to look.
absolutely.
So
No,
I send my guy like hand sketches of like my initial thoughts, and then he
yeah.
sends me back stuff, and sometimes it's like spot on what I want. Sometimes I'm just like, this is way better than what I sent you, so
hmm
I'll go with that.
Whatever works for you. Whatever works for you. And I think that's a smart thing that you're doing too, is if you can find someone with an eye, someone that has, even if they're not necessarily a graphic designer by trade, but they know how to do it, it's always better. And I know I was in a situation for years where if I had decided to self-publish back in 2014 or 15 when I first started writing, I wouldn't have been able to hire someone for a cover. I just didn't have the resources at the time, between single, job, wife, kids that were little, and all the expenses. I couldn't justify, hiring an editor and hiring a cover guy. Fortunately, I can now, but um, what the direction people a lot of times go is they can't afford it, and I completely get that. So they'll just be like, I'll go to Canva and create one. Every so often you'll get someone that will do that and then be like, yeah, that looks pretty good. But most of the time you look at those and you go, okay, you did your own cover.
Right.
And it just, again, circling back to what you said, the covers do, the look on the outside of the book will sell more copies than what's inside.
Yep.
Now, if what's inside is total crap, you get to do that once because then everyone's going to say, literally, whoever wrote this book is an imbecile. Don't ever buy it because the cover was really sharp, but inside was really not sharp.
Yep. Mhm.
So crazy stuff. Okay, so before we dive back into the writing stuff, so I always am interested and I love talking to veterans. Um, where did that desire come to join the military? Was that something that started younger? You have family in the military, and how did you? And obviously, you mentioned already that you were in college in ROTC, so you went in as an officer. So, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so my grandpa was in World War II. He was one of Darby's Rangers.
Yeah.
So he served with the 1st Ranger Battalion he joined up with them when they were in North Africa.
Okay.
He served through the Sicily campaign and then was wounded in Salerno
Hmm.
in 1943. This is actually his flag behind me that was presented at his funeral. Um, he was my first salute when I got commissioned in out of college, and the other part of it is I was a senior in high school when September 11 happened,
Okay.
and I had given serious thought to joining up right after high school.
Hmm.
My parents kind of talked me into getting some college in first. I had already been accepted at Michigan State, so I went that route, but wasn't really finding what I wanted to do there. I was changing majors every 7 days, so I started talking again about maybe dropping out and enlisting in the Army. My dad found the 2 year, it's like a catch-up program for ROTC at Michigan State.
Okay.
Um, so I actually joined the summer before my junior year of college. I did a month at Fort Knox,
Hmm.
Kentucky. It was kind of like a shortened basic training for ROTC cadets, and
Hmm.
then immediately went from there to Army Airborne School, which
Okay.
like sold me on it completely. I was like, all right, this is awesome.
This is it.
Um, so I came back, signed the contract, and did the last 2 years of ROTC, and then commissioned as an armor officer into the Army in 2006. So.
So you liked jumping out of the planes.
Oh, it was awesome.
So,
It's a 3 week school, and you spend the first 2 weeks practicing falling.
right.
So your ass just hurts for like 2 weeks straight, and then you finally get to the cool part where you actually get to jump. And jump week was pretty awesome. So,
So one of my closest friends, he was actually my roommate in college my freshman year. I just literally talked about him last week on the podcast. So people that hear Jeff Morris's podcast will hear a little bit of the same thing. So a week later, I'm still talking about him. So first semester of college, there was four of us stuffed into this small little closet of a dorm room, and this guy comes in, and within a few minutes, I was like, blankety blank blank blank. I will never be friends with this guy. He's a total jerk. Never. 28 years later. So like the flag that's back behind me, he had that flown for me, and I think that one's the Afghanistan one, or is the yes, I got several. So yeah, that oh Afghanistan's there, that one's Iraq. He got me the flag up there at Pearl Harbor. Actually, it was flown at Pearl Harbor on September 11th, I think 2009. So
okay.
he got me that when he was over there. But so he ends up dropping out of college ju after junior year and like just didn't want to be in college. He was in college because his mom wanted him in college. And he went back working for the town, and then all of a sudden he calls me. He's like, "Dude, I'm joining the army." I was like, "What? You know I want to join there?" I said, "Yeah, but you're gonna actually do it." And sure enough, so I went to Benning. I went down and watched him graduate Benning. He was in for a couple of years. I remember he was up Fort Drum for a period of time, so that was pure misery. That place, was horrible,
That's where I,
basically.
I spent most of my time at
Okay,
Fort Drum.
so and then he actually went down to qualify for Green Beret and actually made it through the school, graduated. I went down and watched his graduation there. And then he's been out now for he's retired about 2, 3 years. I can't remember now. It's been several years. But yeah, he did a full career. So he went in, let's see, so he probably went in about a year before yeah, 2000. So he was in during 9/11.
Okay.
So he spent pretty much his entire career during doing deployments, and he loved it. For him, he was single, didn't want to get married in the military, didn't want to have that family dynamic. He saw a lot of the divorces and all the bad stuff that happens and how hard it is. And so he said, if I'm in the military, that's what I'm married to, basically. So he would also then like he would want to get extended. He would volunteer, like, hey, send me back out. He'd come back home and he'd be like, I don't want to be here. I want to be. That's why I'm in the military. I want to be over there. Um, so yeah, it was but so 28 years later, still good friends, and he's got me a bunch of souvenirs over the years. Got to see him
Oh,
about a week and a half ago up in Nashville. So it's always good to connect and catch up with him. But he taught so all that. Sorry, long story to say. He was obviously for being Green Beret and everything. He was airborne qualified. He hated it. And I'd be like, dude, it's so cool. Come on. He goes, there's nothing cool about standing there and just getting pushed out of a plane. He goes, you don't get free fall. He's like, you don't get any of that. So I've been trying to for the last multiple years, especially since he's been out. I was like, I've never skydived. I keep saying I'm going to do it. And I said it at 40. Now I'm almost 50. I'm like, I'm going to do it. I want you to do it with me. And I got him to agree to it. And then this last year, he's like, I don't know, man. It's like, come on, man. You lived through all that. You think the chute's not going to open? I mean, maybe not. It's okay. You had a good run. What in the world?
Yeah, had he done skydiving before airborne school or
Never. And so he's never,
okay,
to this day, he's never done free fall. So the only thing he's done is static jumps,
okay.
and which he
Yeah.
still doesn't like when he was still in.
I mean, it's a little anticlimactic just because like you don't free fall at all.
Right.
I remember I have a like snapshot in my mind of like you go out the door and I twisted around and I was just watching the plane fly away from me as the line like pulled the chute.
Right.
And like then you're just floating down. And it's surprisingly peaceful. Like
Mhm.
you think there would be like the rush of wind and all that stuff once you're dropping, but with that the canopy above you, you're just drifting in the breeze. It's
Yeah.
really peaceful. But I never had to do it in a combat situation, so well, they five jump chump is what they call it. So
Yep.
I did five jumps at airborne school, and that's all I ever did. But
Okay. Okay. So you didn't have to do it after that.
no, no, I went up to Fort Drum with the 10th Mountain, and
Okay.
they don't do any jumping. So, and I was in a cavalry unit, so we spent most of our times working on Humvees, and we trained on Abrams tanks at Officer Basic, and we ended up on MRAPs over in Afghanistan.
Gotcha.
So,
Yeah. He was SF at least a dozen years, long time. So he'd have to keep. I don't know how. I don't remember now. It's been too many years. How often he had to requalify, but he definitely had to. I think he had to jump once a month. If
okay.
I recall, I think it was once a month he had to jump. Because I'd be getting ready to talk to him, or whatever, and he'd be like, "I got to jump this weekend." I'd be like, "Dude, it's gonna be great." He'd be like, "Shut up, it's not great." I'm like, "Just close your eyes. Your chute will open, I'm sure, but you'll be fine." But so, not on a fine note, he was telling me a story. This was years ago. They still do it now, or they did a couple years ago. They basically do this mock invasion. I think it's in Texas, Louisiana, it's somewhere out, might be Louisiana, where Alabama. They do this mock invasion, where SF goes in, big army goes in, and they basically take over this fake town, and they do airborne drops in, and so he did it, and I was checking in on him after, and he was pretty not in a great mood. And part of the reason being is they came in and jumped and they landed and they were, they were fine. And then infantry or the lower end, not SF people. So I guess just I don't want to say lower end's not what I mean, but airborne qualified, I guess, but they weren't SF, whoever was coming through next. The guys
Okay.
watched as one of the chutes didn't open, and the kid
Oh,
was like 19 years old or 18 years old. And it just, at least for him, the emotion and the anger was from like training. The fact that someone loses their life in training. And we talked through it. And the fact is you have to train to be able to do it in the real world scenario. But, it really upset him, which I could totally understand why, of to really watch someone die doing it.
yeah,
So, and
yeah. It's. I mean, they talk about all that risk at airborne school, and
yeah,
I mean, I every year they have all kinds of accidents. I mean, not people dying obviously all the time, but like I mean, broken legs, broken arms, stuff
yep.
like that. And it's if you're training to do dangerous stuff, the training's going to be dangerous too. So
Yeah. Yeah, I know just some of the interviews and some of the guys I know that are SEALs, they've told a lot of stories, watching guys burn out basically. And I mean, because, what they're doing halo jumping and stuff like that. But yeah, to get to that point where you can do it in a combat situation, it's got to be done a lot in training to prepare for it. So
yeah,
yeah, yeah, he had a lot of because again, he did so many deployments, and I saw how it affected him and how it changed him, and even sometimes my kids, he'd come to visit, and they'd be like, he's just, he doesn't seem like he's always happy or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, I said, but you have to understand what he's doing for a living too. I said that's there's a stress that happens with that, and especially when it's a long term, it's not one deployment, and one deployment can be obviously very, very difficult. But when you have a career of basically doing deployments, I think, from just watching him and seeing other people, it takes a toll.
right. No, for sure.
But but it's good to I'm glad he is out. He's doing other work now. And he's what, 2 weeks older than me, and I always give him a hard time. I'll be like, dude, you could I mean, he's retired technically. It's like I gotta work for another like 20 years, man. So you did something very risky, and your reward is that, you can, have hopefully many decades of not having to go work full time. Definitely not having to work for corporate America if you don't choose. So
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of the guys that I joined with are now retiring
I would,
as
yeah.
lieutenant colonels and stuff like that. And it's kind of jealous, but I chose the path I chose. So
Yeah, was there any part of you that wanted to stay in, or were you kind of like, nah, 4 years will be good? Or
I had looked at some other options. I had tossed around the idea of like changing my MOS or my job and trying to become a pilot, a helicopter
okay.
pilot. But
Mhm.
that was at the time when if your eyesight wasn't 20/20, you weren't getting in.
Yeah.
Um, and I had so in 2006 or 2007, I had blown out my knee during a training exercise,
Mhm.
full ACL tear,
Ooh,
meniscus tear, all that.
yeah.
And then so the Army medical being what it is, didn't discover it for about a year, or it was at least 6 months after the fact,
Right.
that they finally were like, "Oh yeah, you actually did some damage,"
Hmm.
and I had to get ACL replacement surgery and all that. And I ended up on a staff position for our deployment.
Okay.
So I just kind of viewed it as, I'm a young captain with no combat experience in a combat arms branch.
Hmm.
Like if I go to career course and then try to take a company command, I'm going to be one of very few company commanders who have never had any field time in a
Hmm.
combat zone. I just didn't feel like that was the right course.
Sure.
I had never really planned on making the Army a career anyway,
Hmm.
so I just decided it was probably a good time to exit after our deployment. So,
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, again, it's something that a lot of people do just, do four, do six, and don't make a career out of it. And there's no wrong answer in that.
right,
Because you're giving, like with anything, with any job you're going to take, you're going to give something up to get something. So, and I do know a few people that have been in for like 12 or so years. I had a conversation with one recently. It's like, are you going to stay in for your 20? Because once you're kind of getting to that hump there, why would you not almost? If
right.
you're going to go in, I could understand like 4 or 6 and saying, yeah, we're good. I did what I want to do, hopefully. And I'm ready to pursue another career field. But um, once you get closer to that 20 for sure, if you can hold out, there's
Yeah,
definitely some benefits to it for sure.
definitely. Yeah. I imagine it's probably been difficult like the last probably like 4 to 8 years, just like
Hmm.
the drastic swings in the political climate too, just
Yeah.
makes it difficult. I mean, you see that among the soldiers, especially when you get higher up and you're leading soldiers, and you see that in the people you're trying to lead, it can be difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's the other thing too, as a dad and having a kid, getting to that age and having conversations of do you, as someone who didn't serve, what stance do you give with your own child? And from that perspective of, you know, I know people that had joined back in the 80s, when I was, in high school and I was getting to be college age. And for them, they might have gone and, went in for 4 years and they never saw you know, any wartime. Now we went 20 years basically in Afghanistan and Iraq. As a dad, it's like, okay, you want to encourage your child to serve, but also you looking at what's going on in the world, it's like, do you want your kid to go serve and maybe end up in Korea or in Ukraine or I
Right.
don't know. It's a challenging thing. It's definitely challenging where um, for years there wasn't, I don't know, can't say there's one as many threats because there definitely have been a lot of threats. But I guess just because we're coming kind of outside of a long extended period of war, I think when you're having kids that age, it kind of makes you reevaluate, and again, it's their choice, but if they come to you for advice, as a parent, you better have something smart to say, I would hope.
Yeah, and it's hard too because like as you get older, you learn more about the I guess I'd say the gray areas of the motivations behind the wars and what
Yeah.
kept them dragging on. And it's like, okay, I want my kid to serve, like you said. I want
Hmm.
him to be proud of his country, but at the same time, is I don't want him to be used for purposes that aren't that intent. So,
Right.
yeah,
Halliburton stock is dropping. You don't want him to
exactly.
have to
Right.
fight a war
Yeah.
for that?
So,
I know.
yeah, I've had that internal conflict, especially with my son getting a little bit older, whether I would recommend it to him or not.
Yeah.
I certainly, if he wanted to do it, I would encourage him to do it. I took so many good things from the military
Hmm.
that I would have never had.
Right.
Um, I mean, I still get up every day at 5 a.m. and work out, and
Hmm.
yeah, sometimes I get my writing in at that time, and
Yeah.
it's about the only way I can be productive is if I stick to that kind of disciplined schedule.
Right.
Stuff like that, uh, you'll benefit from your entire life,
Hmm.
but it's the short-term unexpected risks of joining the military that you weigh that against.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Well, let's go back to the writing. So you're out of the military. Obviously went into civilian work of some sort, I would assume.
Oh yeah, I've been all over the place.
Okay. You've
I
done it
I
all.
I was you said you're a financial advisor or a financial
A financial
work?
analyst. So I work
Okay.
for a large title insurance company, actually. So nationwide
Okay.
company.
I was the world's worst Edward Jones financial advisor for about a year and 2 months.
There you go.
Left that behind. I went to local food distributor because I
Mhm.
got my degree in supply chain management at
Okay.
Michigan. So I was a buyer for there for about 5 years. And then I had a buddy from college who had started a law firm locally here. And one day his paralegal just like stopped showing up to work. And he was desperate for help, and I was looking for an
Hey, buddy.
exit. Yeah, so I was like, "How much were you paying her?"
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it was comparable to what I was making, so I was like, "I will do this on the condition that whenever I'm not actively engaged in law firm stuff, I can work on my writing." And he was like, "Done." So
Okay.
for the last I guess it's been 7 years now. I've
Nice.
been doing that. Probably would still be only halfway done with the first book if I didn't do that.
Yeah.
It's been pretty huge. So
Yeah, no, having that flexibility and be able to work on it, it definitely makes a big difference.
yeah.
100%. So let's talk about Sly Fox Hollow. So where did that idea come from? And you worked on it for quite a while, I guess, from the comments before you got it out into the world.
Yeah, well, this one, the Sly Fox Hollow was quicker.
It was quicker. Okay.
Kilroy was here, was the one that took me for quite a while.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um, yeah, so for Sly Fox Hollow, I just, it was during the whole 2016 like Hillary and Trump and like right when things were starting to get really divisive.
The national unity time. Come on
Exactly,
now,
exactly.
Brett.
I was like, what if you were to just shrink this down into the microcosm of just a small rural town and
Oh,
just like
geez.
watch them tear each other apart? So that's how it kind of started. And then we got into, I think it was before COVID, but the COVID kind of sank it home. Um, I was like looking for something where these two outrageous political candidates could use this something to stoke fear in the town, and use it to their own political advantage. And so I started thinking, oh, it'd be maybe fun to put like a speculative fiction spin on
Mhm.
this. So
Sure.
I started Googling like local Michigan like legends and
Hmm.
monsters and stuff like that. and the predominant one was the Michigan Dogman, which at the time I'd never heard of before.
I
So
didn't hear about it till I read your synopsis. So,
yeah, so I started doing research on the Michigan Dogman, and turns out they've been supposedly spotting it since like 1887. So I was like, this is perfect.
yeah.
And I started writing that in, and the story evolved quite a bit. The first draft I wrote, I hated the ending. So I rewrote like the last third of the book, like just from scratch. Like I just
Mhm.
took the last probably six chapters and junked them
Something, yeah.
and went back after it. But yeah, it was a evolution process. It was much a shorter process than Kilroy, but
Mhm.
I had the added benefit of writing a lot of it during the COVID pandemic when I didn't have anything else to do. So
Find the time when you can. Yeah, that gave shoot, let's see, during COVID. No, I wasn't getting much writing done during COVID. No, I was going through a divorce. That's what I was. I was gonna say, what was I doing? It's horrible. I'm having to think, what was I doing during COVID? So I did do some writing during that year, and I have nothing left from that, what I wrote. I deleted everything I wrote because when you're going through a super fun experience like that, you don't have a lot of good things to say that you want people to read.
I
So. But it was therapeutic. Funny enough, the book that will come out this summer that I'm finishing up, and then I was mentioned that I got my cover guy working on right now. I actually started that the night, literally the night I had mediation, and I kind of knew what my future was going to be. Kind of what did we agree for finances? What did we agree for time? It sounds cliche-ish, but I walked out of the law office and I just felt this burden come off. I think this weight come off my chest. And I hadn't written anything worth keeping in maybe a year and a half. I can't even remember how long the time frame was. So didn't have the kids that night. I went home to where I was staying and I just wrote for like 2 or 3 hours and I kind of hammered out a general idea for a story, which then sat on a shelf for a while. I've wrote a bunch, put it on the shelf because the Body Man got a contract. Then I wrote Breach of Trust that got published. Um, two more basically things, and so I've kind of kept wanting to go back to that story. So that's what I've been doing for the last 6 months is kind of revisiting that story. But yeah, it's interesting how you can do that, and I've had that question recently of like, when you sit down and write, do you have to just stick to that task until it's done? Not this all in one day, obviously, but like, do you do anything else? And I'm like, oh man, no, I can write 30,000 words of a book, put it away, go write a novella, come back 2 years later, pick that thing up and be like, I'll reread. It's not, trust me, the brain's not good enough to just say, oh, I know exactly where I was. No, I'll start from page one and I normally start editing again, kind of relearning the story. But then once I get to that spot I left off, by then I've kind of worked the deals out or the details out in my head and just keep writing. So,
okay, I got a question for you.
yep.
When you sit down and write, do you have like any sort of outline that you've already done, or are you just like a seat of your pants kind of writer?
Mostly Pantser was 100% Pantser for the first couple novels, for sure. Now, what I find that I do, and I'm holding up the little devil advice device here. Now, what I find I do is when I've started a new book, I'll be obviously thinking constantly in my free time about the story because I kind of always know where I want to go. So I always have an idea of like how to start a story and where I think I want it to go at the end. Everything in the middle, 60, 70,000 words in the middle, I have no clue what I'm doing. So what I'll typically do when I start it is I'll start like coming up with ideas and just leave myself memos on my iPhone because it gets backed up every night or real time. It gets backed up to the cloud. Um, and then I reference back to that. But what I've been trying to do for a while now is instead of every night being a clean slate of going, man, what do I want to write tonight? What's the next part of the story? Is I do end up, I go out about 2 or 3 chapters. And so I do 2 or 3 page breaks in Microsoft Word. And all my chapters are chapter XX because I move things around. Um, I'll write a line or two and say, hey, why don't you have such and such do this? Or this part probably needs to happen. And I always want to flip around where I'm not just having like 8 chapters in a row being the one main character because I tend to write more of ensemble kind of stuff. So I'll kind of bounce around and say, okay, you had that character 4 chapters ago. They need to be back for this one. So maybe you can do this with them. That ties to the story. So it's pantser, but it's some form. It's not like, and I always go back to him as an example, but because I know him a little bit, Kyle Mills, who was writing for the Vince Flynn books there for a long time. Kyle does something or was doing something with the Flynn books for like 40 to 50,000 word outlines. So
Nice.
what he'd said to in I might have what a panel or something he told me personally, I can't remember, or an interview, was he could get up one morning and go, feels like a chapter 18 day. The day before he wrote chapter 43. So he'd pull up that thing and chapter 18 was detailed out enough that he could then write chapter 18 because he had gone and done this exhaustive full book outline for every chapter,
Huh.
which to me is Kyle's a great guy. Absolute insanity. Absolute insanity. And I would be, I like, so I'm looking over where I'm filming. I have my couch over on the other side of the room where I do a lot of my writing. I like sitting down every night and like maybe having an idea of like what character needs to be in that next chapter, but kind of have that creativity of like, where do I want to go? How do I tie this in and kind of challenge myself? Um, that keeps me excited. If I knew every night I had to sit down and be like, read my synopsis. Oh, I'm doing this, 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 and this. Not so interested. Can I
Yeah.
change it up?
Yeah. I
How about yourself?
I tried to do well for Kilroy I was just all over the place.
Hmm.
I tried to do multiple character perspectives in Kilroy to begin with, and I got about 10 chapters in and I was like, this is garbage.
Yeah.
So I basically merged all those characters into one character and then
Oh,
wrote the last half of the book just from a first person perspective.
okay.
And then I ended up having to go back and rewrite the first 13 chapters to fit that.
Hmm.
And in the long run, I think it was better for it. For Sly Fox Hollow, I was like, all right, I don't want to rewrite so much. So I am gonna outline as much as I can on a scene by scene basis.
Yeah.
So I just listed, I put number to paper from 1 to like 90.
Right.
And I sat and like, I'll have a scene of this and scene of this. And I knew kind of where I wanted the story to go. I
Hmm.
wasn't sure on the end, but I was kind of doing it as I went. So I got that mostly done, probably 70 scenes I had just like a vague little one-liner about. And then I got about 10 scenes in and I had a really good idea that just derailed
You're,
everything. So I was like, screw that. That's not, that does not work. I'm not doing that again.
yep.
So then I ended up kind of like, I actually went to pretty much the same process you were just describing, where I would seat in my pants a
Hmm.
scene, but then as I was going and getting ideas for following scenes based off from what I was currently writing, I would drop down to the bottom of the page, write a little note,
Yep.
go back up, keep working, and that way I like had a continuous flow of like I always knew where I was going
Hmm.
in the next scene or the next or like, hey, I've got this good idea for scene. These are the key points that I want in that scene. And as I'm writing it, I'm checking those off from my list at the bottom of the page
Yep.
and adding more. So yeah,
That's
it's
cool.
kind of a structured seat of the pants.
I like that. Structured seat of the pants. Yeah, I started a chapter probably about a week ago and I was in a flow and then I all of a sudden I was like I just had it was between my main character, the body man, and the president. So they're working together closely on some stuff in the last couple books. And I had this real great conversation they should have in my head. And I'm like, well, screw this, let's write it. So I put a blank space and I just put need to make some more stuff up and I highlighted that yellow and then I just did the whole conversation piece and like I think I had the kids so I didn't write for a night or two whatever it was and then I came back to it I started another chapter and I'm like I think I got a yellow mark somewhere I need to go back to so I went back to that chapter and I'm like okay, well, what would they do after that? Because the short chapter was going to be too short, or whatever my reasoning was. I needed to fill in something, not make stuff up like worthless, but I had to tie it back to the plot. Maybe why they were going to talk or whatever. I don't remember now because I've written 6 chapters since then. But that's what I'll do. So I always try to, every now and then, I'll try to kind of skim through the document real quick and make sure I don't see any like yellow little boxes somewhere because those are where I like said, hey, dude, you don't know who to call this person. We'll just call him XXX and highlight that yellow. So my first edit's always real fun after I finish the first draft because I'll be going through and I'll be like, well, what's going on here? What was I thinking? I had that happen to one of my beta readers, and it was a couple books ago. Um, Super kind about the feedback in the book, but they're like, chapter 32, though, I think you might have deleted something because it's just there's not much there. And it just stops like after a quote, or after one person said something. So I pull up my master document, I look at it, and I'm like, no, I just must have gone to sleep that night and I started a new chapter the next day. And so then I'm like, what the heck was I going with that? Like, because it was very incomplete chapter, and I'm just like, I am so glad someone saw this
Right.
before I sent it to Kindle or did something stupid, and people like giving me these reviews of guys' first couple books are really good, but man, his third one sucks, man. He just doesn't even finish chapters now. So
I've had that happen with character name changes. Like I'll have a beta reader that's like, oh, this is cool, but who is this? Like
yeah.
they just appeared, and I was like, yeah, I decided I didn't like the character's name from before, so I changed it.
So I won't flip it around. I have a sticky note on my computer right now. One of my not main characters, he's a minor character, but he's sprinkled throughout the document or throughout this book. I'm not comfortable with the name, which is rare, but I'm like, it's not flowing. And so I sat there one night for about 15 minutes and I just kind of I knew what nationality I wanted him to be. I decided to change that as well. So I wrote down like a full-on name. So now one of these nights when I'm kind of like finished and it's not too late, I need to go do a find and replace. I need to find all those mentions and any variation and fix the name so that I don't have that happen. Be like, yeah, Joe all of a sudden became, Joaquin or one or
Right.
whatever. And it's just like, what the heck were you doing? I'm like, I just write the stories. I don't know, man. The
Well,
editor's supposed to
editing
catch that.
report.
I pay him good money. So,
Yep.
so speaking of editors, how do you handle that? How do you handle that aspect? You've got a hookup for the cover, which that's you gotta. I keep providing alcohol to that man for a while because that's a good deal to have. But how do you handle editing?
Well, I've hired out both books because
Yep.
as my wife will attest, I'm atrocious at punctuation and grammar and all that jazz. So, I get it as clean as I possibly can get it, which isn't very clean. And then I send it off. So my first book, I hired out to a guy that I found online, and he had some experience with editing humor novels. He'd
Mhm.
written one of his own. I bought his book and I read it and I liked it. And I was like, man, this guy's kind of my same style. So I
Yeah.
sent it off to him. And it was good. Like it was fine. The only thing that kind of irked me a little bit was that, you can see the time edits, like when they made the corrections on
Hmm.
Word document,
Right.
and all of them were made within like 48 hours. And it took me 3 months to get my document back. And like, I'm not an editor. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's standard practice,
Yeah, I
but
don't
it
know.
doesn't seem like you can make yourself real familiar with a manuscript, uh, doing it in a 48-hour time period.
Yeah.
And I wasn't overly impressed with some of the structural stuff he had suggested.
Right.
Nice guy. I don't want to like talk crap or anything like
Yeah,
that,
if he's
but
listening to this, you did a great job. Just,
yeah, I
hey,
don't think he doesn't follow me. Um,
okay, we're covered.
so
Let's say what we're
for
really, no, kidding.
for Sly Fox Hollow, I actually was like searching around, and then I don't know if you've ever heard of the book Fobbit,
I
by
have, yeah.
David Abrams.
Yep.
I read that book long before I knew did editing on the side,
Okay.
and I thought it was phenomenal.
Hmm.
And so when on Twitter, I saw that he was advertising editing services through like a third party site.
Hmm.
So I contacted him and asked him if he would be interested, and he said yes.
Cool.
And I absolutely loved what I got back from him.
Love it.
He gave me great line edits. He gave me great structural advice.
Hmm.
He talked to me about things that needed to go and things
Mm,
that needed to be sharpened up. And I thought pretty much all of his advice was spot on.
yep.
So I'm hoping that he'll do my next one, but we'll have to see. So
Yeah, that was so. We talked a little bit offline. So my with the Body Man when it originally had come out with through a small publisher, the editing was done there in house. And this sounds like I'm giving them a hard time, but that was the one thing that I got a lot of responses from after the fact of like all the issues people found. And anytime I got one, I would send it off, be like, hey, they found a problem, and they would go. I'd give them credit. They'd go in and fix the manuscript, but the fact that it went out with a good amount of typos or issues definitely was troublesome. So fast forward to putting them out under my own publishing imprint. Yeah, I wanted to find someone that I felt comfortable with, to do the edits. And what I ended up doing was, again, same thing what I did with the cover. I just started reaching out to people I knew that were, indie publishers and said, hey, who's your editor? And, I went to people that I read some of their books, so I knew what the finished product would look like. And then that's how I connected with the guy. I ended up who's actually in Greece. He's an author himself, very successful author. Um, After this will be third book I'm going to send to him, third or fourth. One, two. That's bad. I can't remember. I think this might be number four that I'm about to send him here in a few months. With the last one, I went through the manuscript of what he sent me, but I kind of didn't nitpick and go, oh, what did he change it for? I looked for more of the comments and all that. And once I got through it, and a couple of the comments of like, hey, you need to think about changing this up or that, I made those changes, and then I just said accept all. I accepted every change he suggested, and then I went through a full edit myself. Am I comfortable with everything that's in here? But I just had that comfort level. And that's the one thing that for, knock on wood, for three releases since my release, I haven't got many nasty grams. I've gotten a few here and there if you got a typo, but very rare compared to with the first book. I probably got like 30 or 40 emails in those first couple months. And every one was kind of like, I knew they come out and I knew a book comes out and it has problems because I'd read books from New York Times bestsellers and I'd be like, holy crap, this is the first chapter and I see a typo. And I'm like you. God gave me this ability to tell stories. I chose not to have I won't blame God. I chose not to have the ability to either speak or type the English language very well. So I need a professional. I need someone that can make me sound like, oh, he's not a total idiot, but I'd find typos every now and then in people's books, and I'm like, man, if I'm finding typos, that's bad.
yeah.
That's not
Well,
good.
again, Twitter has been great because I have a couple friends on Twitter who like they've got the book as soon as it came out,
Yep.
and then I started getting direct messages that would be like, page 47, it says this, it should say this, or
Yep.
use the wrong form of this word. And like, so I would go in, make the changes, re-upload it to Amazon.
Yep.
They were awesome. Like,
Absolutely.
so
Yeah, I've got like a dozen beta readers that kind of they've changed a little bit over the last couple of years of who will do it, but I'll normally send out kind of like, hey, I got another book coming out. Anyone have the next couple of weeks available to kind of kick the tires? If there's a story problem, clearly tell me. But by that point, I've been through it enough times that I'm comfortable with what I'm telling. Do you see anything that, is a glaring issue? Don't worry too much about grammar because I haven't yet given to the final edit. And then I have two people after my final edit that I'll give the book to and say, okay, I'm comfortable with the story. If there's something you have a problem with, tell me, but I'm probably not going to change it. But do you see any typos or do you see anything that's just because I've now paid an editor and he does a really good job, but even, like I said, Simon and Schuster puts books out that have typos in them. So just another set of eyes. And one of them's a reader that is actually in South Africa, just someone that over the years, she had found some of the errors in the Body Man back in 2021. And she's like, was this edited? I'm like, yeah, not by me. It would be really bad. But and she had actually volunteered, a year or two later. She's like, hey, if you ever want before you put something out under your own imprint, I'll kick the tires. And she does it in a couple weeks. She'll send me back a screenshot with a little circle and it'll be like, oh yeah, I spelt the wrong, TEH instead of THE, and it made it through all the editor and the spell checker. And I can't blame the editor. Probably in those instances, I probably went back in after that final clean edit and like, the character might say this a little different. So I'll tweak things. But inevitably, I'm always like, you got to be really careful if you change them because you got to go through that line 5 or 6 times because you can't spell the. So, you can't screw up the.
yep, it's amazing what gets through. Like
Yeah.
all like be like, with Sly Fox Hollow, I was probably like 3 months into it, and somebody would be like, "Hey, I found this," and I'm like, "How is that like still an outstanding problem?" But
Yeah, I know. It happens. But fortunately, most readers out there give you a lot of grace. And even because I think probably most readers that get to that detail probably read a lot and
yeah,
they see something probably in every book they read. I mean, I don't know that a book ever makes it out without some form of a typo. Maybe there's a few perfect ones out there. But for those ones that were perfect, I'd say, eh. And also, the story's probably not that good. You know what?
yeah,
Something has to sacrifice somewhere, you know what?
exactly.
But no, it's a great thing. So, we'll talk at the end about where people can go and get Sly Fox Hollow, but what's coming on the horizon? What are you working on, or do you have anything planned to come out soon?
Yeah, so actually, I don't know if our Venn diagrams on Twitter cross enough that are you familiar with Mark Sibley's Mongol Moon
I
book?
haven't read it, but I've seen yeah, Steve Stratton I think will comment a lot on his stuff. So I end up
Yeah.
seeing Mark a lot. Yes. I think
Yeah.
I'm sure I follow Mark as well, but yes.
So Mark's book did really well. It got picked up by Wargate Publishing. He wrote a sequel to it, and that did well too. So what they did was they had Mark reach out to a bunch of his Twitter friends,
Okay.
and asked if we wanted to do short stories
Yeah.
within his world. And then they just put out a anthology. Called Apocalypse in Pieces. And
Okay.
it's basically the premise of the story is like it's like a World War II or World War III type scenario where an
Hmm.
EMP is detonated over the US, knocks out all the power, and
That couldn't happen. Come on
yeah, yeah,
now.
right. I
Yeah,
won't give
you're
away
making stuff
too
up
much,
again.
but I wrote a short story for the anthology called The
Nice.
Spare Parts Club, and it's
Okay.
about uh, a support group of wounded veterans who they're having a get together on the night the lights go out.
Oh wow.
And it's kind of like what happens after that and their response. Um, Flash forward a month or so, and they asked me if I wanted to do a full novel
Yeah.
within the Mongol moon world.
Sure.
And so I said yes. And that's currently what I'm working on. I'm
Nice.
also on the back burner. I've got this strong desire to write a humorous Western.
Go
So
for it.
I've actually I'm pretty far into the weeds already
Okay.
with it.
Nice.
There was a year where I wrote like 500 words a day, no matter what.
Hmm.
Um, and one of the things that I was working on that time, I was just like spitballing this Western comedy idea.
Hmm.
So I had this rough draft with a bunch of characters that I really loved, but I just didn't know how to make them all work right together. So
Gotcha.
that's kind of where I'm at with that is just trying to figure out how I want to piece that story together. But
Hmm.
I'm pretty excited. It's one of those things where I've got like it feels like there's this bubble of a story inside of me that's about to
Hmm.
burst and I want to get it out, but like
Yep.
I just don't know how to do it quite yet. And
I
so
love that feeling though. And I love the creativity side of it and that there's so many, some people say, well, just stick to one thing. It's like, yeah, but once you've done this a few times, and it doesn't work for everyone, but I think once you've done this a few times, it's good to start getting outside that little comfort zone and maybe trying something. Because yeah, I'm finishing up, so this will be book five, written more than five, but this will be the fifth published book. I'm finishing that up and it's supposed to be this month, but it's probably going to bleed into March because I'm a little behind. I have two stories I have to write for a comic. And those are due in a couple of weeks. So I have to do two. It's a follow. Did a short story. A friend of mine was involved in a comic, and the person that owns the comic and that does the illustration said, "Hey, do you want to submit a story?" And I'm like, I don't do horror, but sure, I'll give it a kick. And so I submitted a story, spent some time on it. They liked it. I think the comic just published in the last couple of weeks, last month or whatever. And so he pinged me a while back and said, "Can you give me a?" Because I set it up for a sequel. can you give me another one? I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know where I want to go with it. I still don't. And I'm writing it currently. I was like, you want two or three? How many do I need to write? He goes, three would be better. And I'm like, crap, I gotta like make it into a third part. Just like you, I have an anthology, and that's not announced yet, but there's an anthology that's going to be coming out some point here before forever happens, with a bunch of other writers. I'm talking about doing another one through, again, Twitter. Talk about Twitter and X. I have this chain of different writers that we go back and forth, and I proposed an idea right around Christmas, and a bunch of them are like, "Yeah, let's do it." And I'm like, "But this is my idea, but I gotta finish this book. I cannot dive into this." So I told them, I'll set up a Zoom call. We'll talk in March. I think I've got some good ideas." Um, because to me, that collaboration, when you can bring other people together and work on a project, I mean, that gets really exciting. So,
Yeah,
and I'm trying to then put another book out. It won't be by the end of the year. It's one I wrote before years ago, but it'll be the third volume in my Omega Group series, and it's a backstory for my Troy Evans character. So the book's done, but it needs to be rewritten and fixed, and it's going to take me months to do it to make it publishable. But it's a really, really good story of how he became who he is in the first two books. So I was hoping to have that out by the end of the year, but I think I'm going to push it to next year because there's just no way I'm going to be able to juggle that and do it justice. Um, but I'll tell people, like, friends or other writers I'm talking to, mainly people outside of writing, and they're like, why the heck do you got so much stuff? How do you do it? I'm like, yeah, but that's the thing. If I don't line up stuff like that, then I'll watch Netflix at night, or then I'll do something else that literally doesn't benefit. Might help me unwind a little bit from the craziness of life, but it doesn't benefit my soul.
right.
Writing benefits my soul. To me, it's an outlet, it's a form of creativity, it's pent up stories from, 30 years of being interested in writing. I get to start spewing some of that stuff out, and I hope it makes sense. If not, I'll entertain myself every night, and maybe I'll entertain a few people along the way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the creative outlet is definitely a necessity for me too. Especially my job can be boring, and on the outside, I feel like sometimes I'm a chauffeur for my kids to sporting
You
events.
are. You are.
So it's nice to have that thing that's just like yours and be able to like just
Yeah.
make it whatever you want.
Yeah.
So
Well, I've so many times I know people watch the podcast, and I've got a good solid audience. Probably get sick of me saying it, but I got a pile of books behind me now. So the thing that to me is meaningful with that is when my time here comes to an end on this earth, I've left something behind that kids, grandkids, hopefully, as long as you're wrong and the EMP doesn't go off and fry everything, and the within 90, I've read, 1 second after, within a year, 90% of the US population is dead, and I can attest that that would legitimately happen because I know a lot of people that know. So, as long as none of that really fun stuff happens, there'll be stuff there for futures. Versus like, like we were talking before, I do finance. Um, if I get downsized some point or the economy crashes and I go, hey, we don't need a financial analyst, there's nothing I have that will show I can't give my kids a spreadsheet. I don't even have it. It's company property. It'll be gone. There's nothing I can show my kids and say, Dad, look, I did those numbers, or I did those
right.
budgets, or I did those salary things. The books, there's always something in there. And it'll be something that I think as an author, we leave a little piece of our soul in every book. Hopefully it's a good piece of the soul, but maybe not. Maybe it's the bad piece you throw in there a little bit to kind of just scare people or whatever. Maybe you write horror to freak people out, but you're leaving a little bit of yourself in that story, and I think that's powerful. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean that's all I really wanted out of this was to just write something that people will enjoy
Yeah.
and that will bring other people joy. That's kind of why I stick to the humor aspect because that's how I've always kind of tried to connect with people.
Yep.
That's I guess what I'm most comfortable doing, and
Mhm.
I hope that when people read these books, they get a laugh out of them, and that's if I do that, then I've succeeded in my goal. So
The big banner will be there that Bush put out there. Mission accomplished.
exactly.
There you go, Brett. Well, I always end this with the same question, unless it was your second visit. I won't ask you the same question twice, but I hope you'd agree with me that life is like a book. You have the first page, you have a last page. It's a blessing that none of us know how many pages are going to be in the middle there. But as a writer, and you clearly are one, you get to write your last page. Brett, what would you like that last page to say in the book of your life?
Well, that's a deep one.
I
Ah,
tell everyone the same thing. Dude, I just threw you a softball. Come on, man. This is how easy. This is my test to see if anyone watches the episodes because the authors that are like, oh, wow. It's like, well, you haven't been watching now, have you? Because I asked the same question, same way. But I love
man,
the answers. I love the responses I get.
the last chapter of my life. Well, I just hope that people, are you talking like what I want to do with the last part of my life, or are you talking like
It can be
what?
however you take it. I don't want to steer people that way. If you get to write the ending of how you're remembered or what you wanted to leave for others to see, but it's there's no wrong answer. It's more just what do you want that last thing to be?
Okay, well, I hope that for the last chapter of my life that this is still a thing that I enjoyed doing, and that into retirement I still feel the excitement of that creative bubble that's about to
Mhm.
burst inside me when I need to get a story onto paper.
Yep.
And I hope that people continue to enjoy the things that I write, and that uh, I always produce something that I'm proud of and that I feel like my family would be proud of too. So,
Very good. I'm sure you will. And yes, don't let that I very much the same way. I do this because I enjoy doing it and I've never worked on anything. So not that I've not gotten rid of stuff I've written, correct. I definitely have, but I've never gotten to the point where it's like, why am I doing this? Or man, this is just tedious to do. It's like, no, this is what I have to do. And I've mentioned this in other podcasts. The first editor I hired for I actually had the book edited before I got a publisher. And paid decent chunk of money for an editor. The editor's first question to me was, if I told you, first thing I told you was ain't good enough to get published, would you write another book? And I'm like, dude, I'll write books the rest of my life, even if no one reads them. Because ultimately, they're for me. They're stories that are inside me that bring me joy to tell. And yes, I want other people to write them and I want to do my best job, but I'm the first one it goes through. And if I'm happy with how it turns out, in that form, then that to me was what I tried to accomplish with that particular project. So,
yep,
yeah, and the day
definitely.
it's not fun, there's other ways to waste your time and to lose money and to do all the other things. And I mean, there's plenty of things to do out there. But and I try to do all of it. I try, again, the writing to me is not. It's very important to me, but like we were talking before, but okay, my time with my kids is more precious than the writing. So I had finally got my hardcovers. They took forever from Amazon this time, so I finally got my hardcovers, I guess a couple weeks back. And I always give my kids, I'll order a bunch to sell, but then I always have some for family and friends. And I keep one copy for myself. I make a little note to myself in each hardcover, and those are the only ones I'll keep. Anyone else I have, any other ones I have, I'll sell or give away over the course of years or however long it takes. But I always write a note to my kids in it too. So I was able to give my kids hardcovers this weekend actually. So and just of course I give it to my daughter and I give it to my son. My daughter just like puts it down. I'm like, you're supposed to read what I said to you in that thing. So this is a part of me in that. And but they always it's funny they always ask for it, like when's the book coming? When do I get my copy? They don't read the books. And my daughter's a little too young. She doesn't need to read my books probably. But my son could, and he's just kind of like, I'll read your books one day, Dad. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't when you're at a spot where you want to read the books, they're there for you, and they get basically, I buy my copy from Amazon. I already tell it to people too. It's like if I'm asking people to go out and buy books, I buy a paperback, hardcover, and ebook full price. Only one full price, but I'll buy the rest for the author copies and just pay for the printing costs. But those are the copies I keep, and I give the kids a copy as well, and say, you know what, there's a copy. It's something your dad did. I hope you're proud of it. But I'm definitely very happy to give it to you guys.
Nice.
Okay, so on our last note, where can folks fo go to get Sly Fox Hollow? Where's the best way for them to get the book?
Well, the best way to go is probably through Amazon. It's available paperback and ebook on Amazon. It's like on Kindle Unlimited too. So
Hmm.
if people are on that, they can get it and check it out. It is also I went through Ingram Spark just so that smaller bookstores could order it. I know a lot of people like to uh, try to support local businesses. So if you go into a local bookstore and ask them to bring it in, they can bring it in for you, or ask a Barnes and Noble, they can bring it in too. So
Yep. Yeah, I do the same thing. I do only paperback. I do hardcover through Amazon, but I only do paperback for Ingram Spark just because of the cost. When I was getting into it a couple years ago and seeing like how much you would have to charge and like make nothing either, but how much you'd have to charge to run the hardcover with like a dust jacket to do it
yeah,
like really like what the big five do. It was like 30, you'd have to charge like 35, $36 for hardcover. And it's like, and they did. I sold my original publisher did with the Body Man, and it sold quite a bunch of them, more than I really thought it would. And I'm just like, I feel bad that people, and I bought a bunch hardcovers straight from those sites as well. But I was like, ah, so much freaking money. So at least, and that's now with hardcovers I do them through Amazon, and they're more of textbook looking. They don't have the dust jacket, but I think they look really good. I do the matte finish on them. Yeah, you can charge $24 for them, still make something, but yet you're not asking people to pay 30 something dollars for a book.
right.
So yeah.
I got bit in the butt a little bit with Ingram Spark because I you can't set up pre-orders on Amazon, so I'd set up pre-orders on Ingram Spark,
Yep.
and I had a bunch of pre-orders for Sly Fox Hollow within like probably a 4 or 5 day period. Like a lot of pre-orders from friends, family,
Mhm.
previous people who'd read Kilroy and liked it. And so what I'm thinking happened was that sparked a rebuy in Amazon's system, and they were like, "Oh, we have a huge demand for this book, so we need to
Mm.
place a bunch of orders to get them in stock." So they ordered a ton of copies from Ingram Spark to stock in their warehouses. Then the sales kind of like dwindled off as they always
As
do,
they do, yeah.
and about 6 months later, I got a notification from Ingram Spark that was like, guess what? You get a lot of copies of your book back.
Oh goodness.
So I ended up on the hook for, I think it was almost 200 copies of the book.
At,
Completely wiped out all the profit.
at retail price.
Yeah, yeah. So that was
Yikes.
a little bite. Lesson learned though,
Yeah.
uh, for next time. But I've got a lot of copies that I can sell at local events. I've been doing a free book
Yep. Do you
Friday.
have them on your website or anything?
I don't yet. I
No, okay.
am awful at the website thing.
That's
Uh,
okay.
I need to do that. But
It's kind of hard. I sell them on my website, and it's great because you want people to buy them, but at the same time it's a lot of effort, because
yeah,
then now you're a shipper as well, besides all
exactly.
the other things you do. And so it's a good blessing to have, but it can be, especially earlier, some of the earlier books sold a lot through my website. The last couple are just quieter, but yeah.
Yeah, every now and again I'll do like a free book Friday thing on Twitter, and
Yeah, I've
then
seen them.
like people who retweet, they can have a chance to win a signed copy, and then they send me their address, I mail it out. And
Tax write-off right there, baby.
yep, spreads the word about the book, and so
Awesome. Well, Brett, thank you for your time. And good luck with the future projects. Is the anthology out or is that coming out?
that is out. It came
That is
out
out.
at the end of November.
Oh, the end of November. Okay.
Apocalypse in Pieces. If you want to pick it up, I'm pretty proud of the short story that I did for that. It's a lot of fun. It's another humorous one, but it's a little bit different than the other stuff I've written. So, but
Um, Folks, go check out Brett's books and support him, and you'll see what he's coming out with next.
thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Brett.